my name is Shab. I'm basically the first speaker, but what I really like is if you've got any questions, feel comfortable to just put your hand up and ask away. If you don't understand anything that I've said, or you're worried about any particular point, just put your hand up. This is quite a friendly room. So we're here to learn. Everyone's in the same boat. Thankfully, I'm no longer in that boat. I jumped off it, hurrah. Yeah, so we're here to support each other. So if you've got any questions, even if you think, oh, it's a bit silly, just ask. And also, I'm going to get interrupted by all the educators down the back if they've got anything to add. Okay? So I am a registrar, but I'm about to fellow. I've been a registrar for a very, very long time. I've been a doctor for just over 10 years. I used to be an emergency trainee and sat my primaries and decided to switch to general practice because of children. I've been doing this part-time, and about 2 years ago I was in the same boat as you, and I was like, oh, what am I going to do? This exam is looming up, I've got children, I've got to get myself prepared. So last year, 2014, the second sitting, I sat the exam. I sat all three components together, which I recommend people do, and I passed. I passed all of it. And it's not because I'm a genius, it's not because I have amazing memory. I was pretty sleep deprived because of children, so it was none of that. And one of the things I've found is that it's not clever people that necessarily pass. So if you don't pass, it's not because you're not clever or you're not smart or you're not good at medicine, but you have to go about this process the right way, and there is a process involved. So when I was in primary school in Western Australia, I had this really good primary school teacher that said this motto, do it once, do it right, and it's kind of stuck with me. So no matter what I've done in life, I've tried to just pour everything into it the first go and finish it and move on with life. These exams, as you know, are quite expensive. They're $8,000 to sit, and every time you fail, you have to pay another $3,500 for the OSCE and $2,000 for the other bits. So you want to pass it the first time. So I guess what I really want you to do from now until February when you sit this exam is put other things aside. If you're having relationship issues, work on it and put it aside. Go see a counsellor. Sort out any health problems. If you're having migraines, go have it looked at. If you're having eyesight problems, this is the time to go and get your eyes fixed. Okay, so by the time the exam comes, these next few months, it's all about the exams. Because for those of you who have other things in life, such as interests and children and family, the quality of life that disappears during the exam process is not something that you want to prolong by a year or a year and a half. Okay, so this is why doing a course and really concentrating on studying properly is key.
Can I just add something?
Yes.
If you suffer from anxiety, get it sorted now. Go and see a counsellor, because that's one of the most crippling things about exams. And you find that the week before the exams, if you're suddenly freaking out, that's not the time to get it fixed. Go and do it now. Go and see a counsellor. Go and see a GP.
A lot of these training providers are disappearing, and there are also a lot of doctors amongst us who are not part of the training program pathway. So you're a little bit left on your own. And so like most other colleges, like the anaesthetic college, they're not going to teach you how to pass exams anymore. They don't have any money. So so this course, and I've gone through it and had a look at I'm not one of the course organisers, but I've been given the opportunity to have a quick look at it as a person who's sat it to see if it's for quality assurance, let's just say. And I kind of wish I sort of had something like this when I was going through, just so I could have some practice questions. So what Medcast wants you to do is they want you to pass, and they want you to pass first go. They're going to provide you with a guide, a study guide, a weekly study guide of what to do right up until the exam. So if you follow this study guide, you should have pretty much covered all the areas that need to be covered. They also want to sort of lead you to resources. Finding resources is a nightmare. If you have to find resources on your own, there's so many places to go. But you'll find that on the website, the resources section is really comprehensive, and it'll constantly be added on, so as more things appear. And also, if you find something that's not on there, just let the staff know so that they can put it on there for everybody else to see. They also will provide you with daily and weekly exam practice, which is quite, it's extremely handy. But ultimately, you know, if you don't study and put in the hard yards, you know, it all pretty much comes down to you. So I'm a registrar liaison officer, and I've been one for the last 3 years. And when I started studying, I spoke to literally hundreds and hundreds, because I'm a big gossip, I know everybody. I spoke to hundreds of registrars all around Australia about what made them pass, what made them not pass. And this is where I'm saying to you that intelligent, brilliant doctors have not passed. Okay, so intelligence has nothing to do with this. And I've spoken to GPRA, because I'm a member of GPRA as part of their forum that are constantly talking about these things. I also know a lot of big famous names in the college who write exams, who mark exams. We've got exam markers amongst us, so they know how questions are marked and how people go about not passing and how people go about getting through. And this is what I came up with. Sorry to start with the negatives, but if you don't study widely enough, you're in big trouble. So if you think that you're going to go in with the knowledge of, I know how to treat urges, I know how to do asthma, I know I'm really good with diabetes, what they will ask you is, give me 6 management goals for someone with restless leg syndrome. Can you come up with 6? These are the kind of questions that will come your way. So if you didn't study widely enough, you've kind of missed that entire question. 1 out of 26 questions and you have no idea. Okay, so you need to study quite widely. They didn't have a systematic approach to studying. Now this is a huge problem. I've seen registrars who've said, oh, I'm doing otitis media now and then tomorrow I'm doing diabetes. No, just have an approach, because if you don't have an approach, you're going to miss things. You're going to miss little topics along the way. Have a systematic approach, and I'll go through how to study after this. So they didn't use correct resources. Now you'll find people would say, so, you know, I've spoken to someone who I think failed about 5 or 6 times, and he's still in the program, but he's finally passed. And we said to him, what are you using to study? And he said, Harrison's. I love Harrison's. Don't use Harrison's. Harrison's is not general practice. It's got nothing to do with us. You need to use exactly the right resources that the college is writing the exams from. Okay, so finally he went on to use what we told him to use, and he's finally passed, which was wonderful news. So you need to also work on your weaknesses. So if you're a male especially and you know nothing and you don't see patients that are coming with menopause, PV bleeding, focus on it. If you're brilliant at reading ECGs and you did, you know, cardiology training overseas or here before you switch to general practice, maybe spend a little less on cardiology and more on the areas that you don't know, because it will get covered, it will appear, and you just won't have the answers. The other thing is Australian-specific themes. Later, I think Dr. Miller's going to talk to you about, and Dr. Stanford are going to talk to you about, you know, just about the actual exams themselves, the separate exams, and why some people are failing specific things in terms of percentages. So what you'll find is that there are more people who are trained overseas failing these exams than Australian. It's not because your training overseas was not good, because I'm sure it was brilliant. It's just that there are Australian themes that run through these questions that are very specific to here. So for example, if I was to go and sit an exam in Germany, I wouldn't know how to answer some of their public health questions. So you must delve really deeply into some of these issues like Aboriginal health, rural access issues, and of course things that are very much to do with our healthcare system, such as writing a care plan. In my exam sitting, I was given a question on arthritis, just osteoarthritis. So they gave me the story of a 70-something-year-old man who's come to see you with osteoarthritis who needs a care plan. And I thought, okay, so the first question was, list up to 5 providers that you would include as part of your team care arrangement, and why. So if you've never written a care plan, never dealt with a care plan, it's time to look this up on the NBS website, look up Medicare, about what they expect and what the rules are about it. The other thing is they didn't look up the other stuff. There will be statistics in the exams, so you may end up with a viva in the OSCE where they just give you a study, like the summary of a study, and you've got that 3-minute reading time and you have to read it, and you have to quickly understand whether the statistics are decent or they're not. So you need to critically appraise a paper very quickly. So that's the other stuff that you should start looking into. And also think about legal issues. They love legal issues. They'll have a 14-year-old that comes in without her mother wanting the pill. Okay, so look up what the legal issues are pertaining to general practice in Australia. And these will come up over the next 4 to 6 months during this course. Before I go further, you know, a lot of these things that will come up in the OSCE, there will be a webinar, I think 2 webinars on the OSCE once the written has been done. Dr. Miller has been running, unfortunately, obviously her workshops are going to get axed for Closed City Country, but she's been running these OSCE courses for a number of years, and she has produced the medal winner for the nation and 2 state medal winners. And when I sat my OSCE, all of us, 100% of us passed because of her workshops. So you're very lucky that you're going to get her workshop later in the year, or it's early next year. So please do not miss that. And she's going to cover a lot of these sort of like topics of, like, you know, that you should be thinking about, you know, Aboriginal versus, you know, you'll get a patient who lives 400 kilometres from the nearest hospital, what would you do situations, okay? Okay, so keeping to time, that's another thing that's going to get discussed later today. It is so crucial. You could have studied like anything. You could have studied, you know your stuff. If you don't know the timing per question, per exam, you're in trouble. You must time yourself on the day. You need to keep a mental clock in your head for the OSCE, or have a clock for the written, because you're given so many minutes per question, and you need to use it and not go over. You miss one question, that's again 1/26th of a mark that you've completely lost, that you're never going to get back. The other thing is that they didn't know about exam format. How many people rock up and they don't actually know, you know, that there's what the different types of questions they're going to face on an OSCE. So it's great that you're doing a course where you become a bit more familiar with these sort of things. Biggest thing, and I know people will argue with me, and I used to argue about this before I sat the exam, but you must read. Like, so those that didn't read a question properly, they missed things. For example, so as you know, there's three types, there's 3 exams. There's the AKT, which is multiple choice with different types of multiple choice. There's the KFP, which is roughly a short answer. I hate it when you call it that, but a short answer paper. And then there's the OSCE. So there are key feature questions. So there's little hints in there, and they're the key feature. And if you look at the key feature, stare at it, think about it, that's what you need to do to sort of get an answer, get a diagnosis, come up with the most likely this, the most likely that. So everything they write in a question is there for a reason. They don't put in anything that shouldn't be there. They don't take away anything that shouldn't be there. So if you read a question properly, eventually, even if it's a tricky one, some kind of an answer will come to you. So read everything right to the very end and do not make any assumptions. There was one question in my AKT where they had a picture of a lesion. But if you had just thought, oh yes, I know what this is, and just went and found the answer, you would have been wrong, because it asked, what does this look like, or is confused with. So it was the differential they were after. And a lot of people just didn't read that far. They just thought, and they missed that very easy question. There's a lot of people that panic on the day. I saw someone hyperventilating and had to go next door to a coffee shop, calm down and come back. there's people that have semi-fainted in OSCEs. Just calm down. It's just an exam. I know it's a very important exam. It's eating your life right now, but just relax. Calm down, go away, sit somewhere by yourself, gather yourself before you walk into any of these exams. And there's also the issue of being too blasé. People say, oh, it's just GP exams, it's not specialty exams. Well, actually, these are very difficult exams. They're not there to let everybody pass. They want to assess your ability to work in Australia in any setting, whether you're here or in the middle of the Red Centre. Okay, so don't be too relaxed about the study process. You need to start focusing from now. And start doing exam questions, which you will be given through this course. And I've seen the quality of the exam questions, and they're very, very, very similar to what I had in the exam. Okay, so I've done another course. I've done previous courses where it wasn't quite similar. So you're getting very close to the exam questions through this course, which is great. It'll get you prepared for the style of questions that you're about to see. And also you need to start thinking about things just to do with general practice, not any other specialty. So the 3 golden rules are: you need to know the enemy, which is the 3 exams. You need to study like the wind, take it seriously, put away any ideas of falling pregnant. This is not the time. Don't let your partner talk you into pregnancy. This is definitely not the time. And you need to learn to read the questions carefully. So they're the 3 big golden rules. So when I sat my exam, I had a 3-year-old child, I had a 18-month-old daughter, and I was 5 weeks pregnant by accident. So I had no idea. I thought I had gallstones when I was sitting the written. By the time the OSCE came up, I was vomiting and very much pregnant. And I still got through. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. So that's why I'm saying get your health right, get other things out of your life and just focus on the exam. And the only reason I managed to get through is because I prepared, to the point that when there was only 1 month left before the exam, I took my family on a 10-day holiday to Hawaii without any notes to calm myself down, came back, revised, and passed. So knowing the enemy, this is the first thing I want everybody to do. And having spoken to the doctor who is the head censor, the national censor for the KFP exam, who happens to work in Wollongong. So one of the things he said was, I am so sick and tired of candidates not reading emails that come to you from the college. You must read any email that comes out. Look on the website. There is an exam section on the website and people don't look at it. So start by reading that Fellowship Exam Candidate Handbook. It is 17 pages. It doesn't all apply to you. Just skim read it. Look at special considerations section. You never know what could happen. Okay? During my OSCE, for 10 seconds, the lights on that floor died. So we had a blackout. And because there was no windows, you were standing in pitch black. So everyone lost 10 seconds. 10 seconds in an OSCE is an eternity. So a lot of people put in special consideration forms, okay? So just read about it and know that it's there. Look up the deadlines for payments. Don't miss them. They don't say, yeah, all right, you can pay now. It's finished. You can't sit it for another 6 months. And if you haven't already done so, you need to join the college now. Do it now because you need to start getting these checks sent out to you. And when you do join the college, they ask you, do you want PDF or hard copy? Say, I want both. I've paid you a lot of money. I want both of this. Okay, you need this. You need to have a hard copy. You all know what tech magazines are? If you don't, you're in big trouble because they're the most useful things for this exam. Now, there are 2 videos that I'd like you to go home and also watch. Again, it's on the website. They're 8 minutes long. They're practical videos about how the exam questioning is done. Some of you have already sat the exam, so it's a waste of time, but they'll show you what the program looks like, how the flagging system works, so if you don't know how to answer a question, how to flag it and come back to it. So it's just to, like I said, it's for you to know the enemy, know what you're dealing with. Okay, so take and like I said, this will be discussed later, to look very closely at how long each exam is how many minutes and seconds, and I mean nanoseconds, are allocated to each question, and keep that in mind, and just keep that in mind for the next 4 to 6 months. Don't forget it. Timing is everything. So I think in the KFP, you literally have 8 minutes per question, and each question has a subsection. I luckily managed to finish the exam about maybe 26 minutes early. So that's how close I knew I was in terms of timing. So I had time to go back, and luckily I did, and I changed a couple of answers. Okay, so keep to time. Don't waste time. Don't dwell too much on one question. Now, this is just the practicalities about exams. If you're sitting all 3 exams, pay for it all 3 early. There's pros and cons. If you leave it until you've got your AKT results, you will get allocated whatever's left over in terms of exam centre. So you might be here and they may send you off to Tasmania. That's good for some people because they went somewhere else and they passed. It was good to get away from here. I did my OSCE in North Sydney. It's supposed to be the hardest marking centre in all of Australia. But I found them just lovely. They were so helpful. I was vomiting between stations and I had my vomit bag. They looked after me. They were wonderful. So don't worry about not going to North Sydney. I thought it was fantastic. But if you pay early, you will get to go, you'll have more of a chance to get the centre that you want that's closer to you. Stay in a hotel nearby for the exams. Just do it. Get away from children. Don't drive 2.5 hours to get to the exams and then risk a car accident on the way. Not you, but you know, blockages and whatnot. I sat my written exams in Elizabeth Street here. My hotel was Menzies. It was literally 100 metres away. I asked them to be on a quiet floor. They put me on a floor where there was no other patrons. I had an entire hotel floor to myself. It was quiet. I lay on a big bed, had the best sleep I'd had for ages because, you know, I had multiple children and noise. But I knew where the exam centre was and I got myself there without that added stress because that just adds a degree of adrenaline to your life that you don't need. Make sure you eat a full breakfast, but do not drink too much water. Okay, do not, I kid you not, do not drink too much water before the written. OSCE, that's fine. There are rest stations where you can go to the toilet. You don't have time in the KFB. Do not get up from your seat. Do not do anything. Just write like the wind. If you're normally a coffee drinker, don't make that day the day that you're not going to drink coffee. Have a cup so you don't end up with a withdrawal headache. I kid you not, this comes up with a lot of people. It is such an intense day. For people who have sat this exam, you'll know it's so intense. You get headaches, you feel awful. Take Panadol, Nurofen with you and take earplugs. This is all you hear. People are typing in the room, hundreds of people all around you. There's people like playing around with lolly wrappers, cups of water. Take earplugs, cut out the world, just concentrate. It's just you and the exam paper. Plugs, take them with you. Okay, so just remember, just be comfortable on the day. Wear comfortable, like the most comfortable. If you can rock up in pajamas, do so. OSCE, don't wear coats and with the OSCE, yeah, that's right. Wear, you know, don't wear a big heavy suit where you're going to be overheated. Just dress up nicely like you would in general practice. But you need to be very comfortable. High heels, don't do it. Now, what happens on the day with the AKT and KFP? The KFP is the first exam up, which is good because it's so intense. At the end of it, you just want to die. Just make sure you take some chocolate or nuts, a nice energy drink for the intermission, for the lunch break. They give you sandwiches. It's almost inedible. It's old and dry and hot. So just take your own stuff and eat something. You would feel so drained after the KFP. So, you know, you have to take along an ID, stay away from all the other candidates, especially the ones that have got notes. Just stay away from them. Now remember, once they say, you know, once you've logged on and you're ready to go, just write like the wind. Don't overthink any question. You know, flag questions. If you're not sure of something, put something down, do not leave anything blank, and always, you know, you'll have an opportunity to come back. So the exam cannot actually be submitted until you've gone back and removed all your flags, okay? So if you've accidentally missed something that you didn't know and you haven't gone back to fix, it lets you go back, but it won't let you submit. But if you haven't finished on time, it just freezes, ends, and that's it. Okay, so you don't need to press send for it to disappear. So if you can't see an image properly, and you know they'll have a lot of images, lots of images, and if something comes up fuzzy, like this, frantically, just get their attention. They have a few pictures in the front of the room. They'll bring it up for you to have a look if you can't see it. Okay? There's no point if you can't see an ECG. You can't make a guess. And if your computer freezes, put your hand up. They'll add time to you. So they're very kind that way. They let you have an extra amount of time. They give you water. They give you lollies. And the front without wrappers now because so many people complained. But have some lollies in a jacket pocket that doesn't have rattly bits in there. Just something just to give you a little bit of a boost that you can pop in your mouth like a mint. And they give you a plain paper and pen that they collect along the way, though yeah, they don't always do that. But what the purpose of the paper is, if you've got a key feature and you're really stuck, sometimes it helps to write down 42, male, cough. So you can actually just, your brain can sort of narrow down on that rather than all the other words that are on that question. Okay, so that's what the paper is for. I used it a couple of times and it helped me, but you don't need to take anything along with you. Now with the OSCE, I unfortunately forgot to bring it. Have you all got the Susan Verne book yet? There is unfortunately the latest one has just come out and it has new, like 13 new cases. They fixed the old ones. If you can invest, buy the new one because it's got more cases in it, okay? So a lot of it is just acting, you know? Hello, how can I help you today? And then you go straight into it, you know? So it's a lot of acting, it's a lot of practice, sorry.
Sorry, is it similar to GPRA examination book? Is it the same book?
The, which one?
The GPRA exam.
No, it's separate. This is Susan Verne's clinical examinations. Okay, so I really suggest you buy it. You should buy it when you start studying for the OSCE. Some people say you should use it to study for the KFP. I don't quite agree with that because if you use it for that, you've lost one brilliant resource in terms of a book to use for the OSCE. Okay? Yeah.
The new Susan Verne, has it got, is it all completely new cases or it's
No.
what's in the original one updated?
Yeah, that's right. So extras and updated with more explanations. So the other thing is, aside from practicing timing, because as you know, there's like 8-minute stations, long case, there's the vivas. It all again comes down to how to act and how to act really quickly in that 8 minutes. And the examiners are very used to guiding you in such ways, and they do help you. They say, we don't help you, and they have very straight faces, but they do help you. And sometimes I remember walking out of one of them feeling very green, and I remember one of the examiners patted me on the back and just nodded. And you know, you just feel better. You feel better that, you know, you're okay, even though you've been vomiting all along, that you've just managed to pass through. No, I didn't vomit during stations. It was during the rest stations, thankfully. But I was very green on the day. So again, stay near the venue. There's water and biscuits at rest stations, and I promise you, the second you've finished the very first station, which you will inevitably not do brilliantly in, so prepare not to do as well in that one, you do calm down. The nerves calm down, adrenaline settles down, and the rest of the 4 hours becomes just like a day in general practice. I didn't think it would be, but you actually breeze through it, and it's a lot better, okay? So because you know that they're not there to bite you. But the performer is the most important thing. And Dr. Miller's going to teach you how to do a performer. I had one. I called it the never fail exam of the OSCE performer. So, you know, at some point I'll write my version up and we'll see if we can upload it up to Medcast somewhere so you can see what I did. And when I came up with this, it got me through every single station without any issues. Okay. So how to study? There's different ways people have studied that they've told me about. Some people study just symptoms like cough, because as you know, the exam is symptom-based. And others study topics like asthma, COPD. You need to do both. You can't do one or the other. You must do both. Some people just read notes. Just get into the habit of writing notes down, because in the last week you need to do a little bit of revision on areas that, or in the last few weeks, that you weren't so clear on. You need to start looking around. Look at what's in the news. You know, it's 6 Minute Medicine, the website that sends out an email every single day that clogs up your email system. They're brilliant. They write an article about what's topical. Like, for example, if H1N1 comes out, they write about it. They write, this is becoming an issue, or people not immunising is becoming an issue. And then you realise, oh, this is really topical. And what you'll find is it'll appear in the exam. It'll come in the next exam. So just keep your eye open. Like 1 year, I think 2.5 years ago, they had avian flu. And so many people got it wrong because they didn't pay attention that avian was becoming a bit of a problem in the community. People were catching it and coming to Australia, return travellers. Find yourself a study group. To be honest, I didn't have one for the writtens. I just can't study with other people. I bounce ideas, but I can't just do one-on-one, but it works wonders for others. Just remember, Medcast is a really good community because it's all online. You don't have to make an attempt to see someone face-to-face if you don't want to, or you can Skype someone that you've clicked with on Medcast. But having one for the OSCE is a must, unless if your partner is a medical person that can help you do cases, practice cases. You must get yourself a study group to practice timing. Start listening to podcasts. Go on to thinkgp.com. They've got a lot of videos, and the videos are brilliant. Some of them are not so much relevant to the exams. Some of them are extremely relevant to the exams. There's also Form for GP. They've got a lot of brilliant articles. In fact, they had a few cases of the dizzy patient, and it dawned on me that some of the people who are writing on Foam for GP are exam writers. So in the last exam, they had 2 cases of a dizzy patient, different settings. But I thought, oh, that's a bit of a coincidence. So have a look at Foam for GP. There's some phone apps. None of them actually give you exam questions that are like the exam, but if you can get the one called MERTA flashcards, diagnostic flashcards, it's got 500 questions, but all it does is it gives you a symptom and then you have to pick a diagnosis in your head. So it's good practice, like you're just standing at Coles for a couple of minutes, you can quickly flick through, and it's system-based, or you can just jumble it up and just have any old random set of symptoms come up. Now remember, they say that general practice is a great learning opportunity. So if you see anything different, odd, or common, just always look it up. Look it up on therapeutic guidelines if you've got access. So step 1, you need to buy MERTA. Anyone who did not study out of this book got themselves into a whole load of trouble. Now if you have a look at my book, look, it's just falling apart, because you need to read this book from cover to cover. You need to know this book. The exam comes out of this book plus other stuff. Buy the latest copy if you can. Sorry, was there a question? No. Okay, so buy the latest. The 6th edition has come out. I used the 4th for last year, and it was extremely old because I got to parts on management, and there were some drugs that no longer exist in Australia, for example, for migraines. I thought, so I had to use other resources. So get yourself a MERTA. So you need to learn the prompt system. Do you guys all know the prompt system? I think it's being discussed in great detail later, so I'm not going to mention it.
There's copies in the back.
Yep, so there's copies in your bag, but this is like how MERTA's diagnostic model works. So you've got probability diagnosis, red flags, often miss, masquerades, and is the patient telling me something, yellow flags. Questions are asked based on Murtaugh's prompts. So they'll word things in a question like, what is the diagnosis you do not want to miss? Okay, so they're after red flags, part of the red flag list. I'm just going to sort of quickly pass this around. Is that okay? So this is prompt, but it's also got a copy of a lot of Murtaugh's front page on here. Just have a quick flick through, because they're the stuff that you need to learn in terms of symptoms, going through symptoms. So familiarise yourself with the triad system. Okay, so here's an example of a triad: angina plus dyspnea plus blackout equals aortic stenosis. Okay, so they may give you a 62-year-old with some of those symptoms, and then if you've seen it in Murtaugh, you've studied it, then you can recognise it. Especially if you've gone through the apps as well and flicked through all the triads on the app. Next, before you start anything else, go to part 1. There are parts and chapters under parts. Part 1 of Murtaugh is the basis of general practice. There are about 16 or so chapters. They're very easy to read. You can read it in like an hour and a bit. 2 hours tops if people are bothering you and there's something on television. But they go through, it goes through the other stuff in general practice, the other themes, the other domains that will appear in the exams. Of course, chapter 18, the chapter's called A Safe Diagnostic Strategy. So that's where the triads are explained. So read all of that before you start anything else. And of course, the part 11, which is on Indigenous health. Next, you need to print out this Wentworth grid. Have you all done that already? Have you got this Wentworth grid at home? Print it out. This is going to be your study guide. This is your tick list. Okay? So it's based on the beach data. As you know, the beach data is all this sort of information they collected since, I think, 1998 from general practice around Australia to see what are the most common, or what are general practitioners seeing. And they've come up with this big list. This is just a little snapshot of it. And it says, look, 13% of cases that GPs saw was respiratory. And what's in bold are the most common of the common that you must know. So whatever's bold, you've got to really know well. Okay, so I want you to start with the top of the list being respiratory and work your way down. So the next thing is musculoskeletal and dermatology and so on and so on. So that's you studying systematically. Next to this, make yourself a list. You will go on to Medcast under resources and you'll see that, say under respiratory, we've got a fair number of resources that have been linked to. But make a list of all the chapters in Murtaugh that apply. So Murtaugh is basically divided into half of it being symptoms, which is part 3, and then half of it is, I think, part 4 to 10 is condition-based. So you will have, if you look down the contents page, you'll have abdominal pain, arthritis, anorectal disorder. So it's all alphabetical. Go through the list with a highlighter and say, right, so I'm doing this respiratory. I need to cover chapter 42, cough. I need to do dyspnea, chapter 49. Make a list of it, and as you do the chapters, highlight it off the book. So by the end, you know that you have pretty much read the whole book. So if you pick up this book and read it from cover to cover, you're wasting your time because it's not systematic. It's just jumping from system to system. Now, in the second part, where it's condition-based, all the really important chronic illnesses are listed, like COPD, asthma. There's emergency cases. Emergency is huge in these exams. And there's also things like men's health, women's health, pediatrics. Okay, so find yourself a list of everything that needs to be done.
Study
No, yeah. So the study timetable is basically starting from this weekend. So next week is respiratory week. So if topics are huge, like for example respiratory being the most important, so technically the college uses more respiratory than say something really obscure, but that's not always the case. That's why I said you need to study widely. So because respiratory is pretty important, 2 weeks of your studies are dedicated to respiratory. Okay, so next, when you're covering topics, so you say, right, I need to do the bold ones first, I'm going to cover asthma, or I'm going to do COPD. You need to, in your head, don't just learn COPD X, this is how it's set out. Start changing scenarios in your head in the shower. Okay, so what if I've got a 90-year-old in a nursing home with COPD who now has a cough and a fever? What kind of questions would they ask me? What if it is a 56-year-old who's well and has never had any medical problems, who's small, who has a 40 pack year smoking history, who's coming with a cough? What kind of questions would they ask me? So make scenarios up in your head. And change key features like male, female, child, adult, cultural backgrounds, Aboriginal, in the middle of Australia, in a city. Where would I have access to? What about travellers? What about refugees? They love changing things to travellers and refugees. Is immunisation involved here? What about safety netting? Think about investigations. So if there is an investigation attached to an illness and there's gold standards, you need to know about it. You also need to have a look and see what the Australian what the practicalities are in terms of, does Medicare pay for this or not pay for this? You need to know all this. So if you're covering osteoporosis, for example, you need to know who is eligible for a bone density scan and who isn't, who is eligible for treatment and who isn't, okay? In terms of not just what, you give bisphosphonates, but who can actually have it and the government actually pays for it. And you need to learn to interpret everything. So you're covering asthma, you must cover spirometries, you must learn your ECGs with cardiac, okay? They will give you stuff to interpret. And again, management. Think about age, locality, access, and who else is available, like Aboriginal health workers. So if you're covering asthma as an example, so cover the relevant chapter in MERTA, look for any Australian guidelines. So so you go, here we go, the Australian Asthma Handbook. You must know this, you must know this really well. If this does not come up in the written questions, it will come up potentially in the OSCE. Okay, so if there are guidelines, and especially if it's Australian, not like things like CHAD 2 and whatnot, but you need to know those because then there may not be any Australian guidelines, but learn your guidelines. There is, as you know, the diabetes in general practice. Read this, you need to know this. This will come up every OSCE I've seen, because I've asked registrars after they've sat exams, what was in the exam, what questions did they have? They just love diabetes. My long case was a diabetes question. A young man came in who was 19 years old, was under the care of a pediatrician for his type 1 diabetes, and now he's moved to the city, he's away from his mother who looked after his diabetes, and they wanted me to discuss care. How do I look after him today? How do I look after him next week? Long-term referrals. Is he using his devices properly? What are his medications? Are they the right medications for him? So you need to look at these major guidelines. Okay, so I've already mentioned, things like how to interpret things. Now remember, there's like ECGs, spirometries, chest x-rays, but there's other stuff like they might give you an audiogram result, or they might give you blood results. You just need to learn how to interpret tests. Don't assume they're not going to give you something curly-whirly. They just love those. Now with asthma, before you finish covering it, think about, is there anything to do with Medicare associated with asthma? There's asthma cycle of care. Quickly look that up and see what the eligibility is and what's involved. Then think about any emergency cases associated with asthma and how it's managed. And then how you would incorporate it into a care plan with other medical problems, long-term, short-term. They may have a question on, here is a child who's just been diagnosed with asthma, please go through the use of a spacer with the mother. So you need to learn how to put a spacer together, how it's cleaned, how it's used, oh, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So think about safety netting issues, medications, purpose, side effects, pregnancy. You may end up with a pregnant patient. And start practicing verbally talking this out as if you're explaining it to a patient. SNAP. They love SNAP. So always think, does SNAP apply here? It's not just for the OSCE, but smoking, nutrition, alcohol and physical activities. Is that part of the management? Always think about it with every answer. And think about conservative management. I discovered I had this book after I'd done the written, and I was very disappointed. I wish I had this while I was studying for the written. It's Murtaugh's Patient Education. Some of you would have it on your computer at home, at work, but in it, he goes through, how to manage something, and then all the really amazing sort of conservative stuff like get a flannel, heat it up, or use bicarb soda. I have this at work, and sometimes I just open it and go through it with a patient. But this is what gets you through an OSCE in terms of coming up with all your management goals. Now, you need to use the other resources. After you've used a Murtaugh and you've looked for guidelines, you need to use Australian Family Physician for the last 3 years. So you know what they all look like. They get sent out to you when you join the college. Go through, it should be on Medcast resources section as well, but just see if is there anything on asthma. Not studies, but articles on asthma. This is just randomly, this is a book. It's called Symptom Sorter. It's quite good. Some people love it, some people not so much. I really enjoyed it. Again, it's very good in terms of covering the symptoms. Yeah, when you're going through the symptoms of at the start of a chapter. So the other thing is the Czech magazines for the last, say, 3 years. You'll find some checks. You need to do all of these. Don't skip these. There was one on restless leg syndrome, and that came up in the exam. And like I said, so many people struggled. If they'd only looked through that check, they'd gone through it, you think, restless legs, who cares? If it comes up in when you're covering sleep disorders, it will appear in, so the last, say, 5, look at them very carefully. Sorry. Just moving on very quickly. Again, go on to Think GP and start looking. There's a few topics that are really good in Think GP. One of them is osteoporosis, and then there's kidney disease, chronic kidney disorders, and there's one on depression, mental health. I found those so good, so good. They were just all, they covered everything you needed to know for the exams and general practice in Australia perspective. If you can get your hands on therapeutic guidelines, study out of those for when it comes to management in terms of Australian availabilities for pharmaceutical stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Just get it. You can't. I actually don't know how you would study management without it.
You can get it as a tax deduction.
Yeah. And then, that's right. So have a look at the red book and the green book. Opportunistic screening and prevention is very huge. You might have someone coming in, a 20-year-old man may come in with, or woman asking for the pill or something else, but they may ask you what else should you consider. And we're supposed to ask everyone, consider opportunistically offering an STD check to everyone up to the age of 25, 16 to 25. It's in the red book. And that if you haven't looked at it, you wouldn't know that and you wouldn't get that answer correct. Yeah, so again, there's a lot of guidelines on the RACGP website. that you need to know about. And also look at the association websites. I've just given 2 examples there. One of them is the College of Pathologists. It's their handbook. When you're looking up how to interpret tests and what tests you would do, that's gold standard. Go and have a look at their website, because that's Australian based. And I've just put up Andrology Australia, because they'll discuss things like PSAs and whatnot. Get yourself a hard copy of the immunisation handbook. Immunisation comes up a lot. And also NPS articles on management, the latest ones on the topic that you're covering. Now remember, you will get lots of ECGs. They don't just put easy stuff. They love Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome, for example. They'll have lots of pictures, dermatology pictures, so you've got to know your dermatology. When you get to the tick list, do it properly, and then you may have to do some extra bits. They will have x-rays. 2 years ago, they had a child that had fallen, and he had sustained a fracture dislocation of the elbow, and you had to describe it. So you need to learn how to describe an x-ray, describe a lesion on a chest x-ray. Not just say, oh, there's a white spot, you will get no marks. You need to say there's an opacity in the right upper blah, 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 yeah? Or there is a delta wave, or there is a missing P wave, but again, based on reading the question and seeing what they actually want you to describe. So read questions carefully. I can't stress that enough. So in summary, you need to start studying now. Don't play around, don't miss any nights, focus, get your health in order. Whatever emails that are sent to you from the college, read it. About a month before the exams, the written exams, you will get a copy, a practice exam sent to you. Do it and send it in, do it in the timing allocated. In fact, they are actually old exam papers that they're no longer using. So it is very much similar to what you will sort of see on the day, but not always. Because I think even the exam itself is becoming a little bit harder. But it's a good way of sort of seeing what sort of exam questions that you will be presented on the day. And as a minimum, MERTA, checks in the last 3 years, AFPs, Australian and RACGP guidelines, and therapeutic guidelines for management. Any questions? Sorry, I know it was a lot to just throw out.
That was fantastic.
No?
Thank you very much.